So I've been loving my ultimate Lepic build for quite a while, and I know he can be really fun in boss fights, but I really like him in mob fights. I think he's really cool with that traction grenade. So I've had this build done for a while, and I've been meaning to share it with you, but with the new 400% infiltrations and the new non-crit mods that they've given us, I'm glad I didn't, because this version is even better than the one I had before. Let's get into the details.
Makes it exciting!
Hey, just a quick heads up, this is a very efficient build. And even though it's hella good, Freyna is still better. And I think I have to start every video this way because I know somebody's gonna say, I'm just gonna use Freyna. Totally, man, totally. Freyna's great. We have Freyna build videos, check that one out here. But some of us run many builds and we find that fun. There's a big part of the community that does want to use more characters because we like having a variety of builds. And that's the group where I fit into. And I like tinkering. And so I'll come up with multiple builds knowing that, hey, Freyna's easier. She makes the game really easy. But for me, if I use just Freyna, I would get bored. Is anybody else like that? Here's our mod slot configuration. Now, I like to start with the Transcendent mod, and the thing is, you don't actually rely on any of these mods. Power unit change, so this can give you more firearm damage. This is also an excellent option, so if you want to go that way, you can. But the way I have this configured, you're one-tapping a lot of these guys with your grenades once you're all sort of warmed up. It's rare to actually shoot. I'm surprised if I go through an entire mag doing a solo 400% run. That's something, right? Because of his ultimate. That is his weapon, and it's so strong, it just obliterates everything. Remember, his arm is his gun. So regenerative braking is where I ended up landing. It gives us a chance to recover MP when using a skill. Any skill. And with the amount of skills I'm throwing out, it's surprising I don't run out of MP. The star of the show is really our third skill, which is called the traction grenade. It's built on fire and singular, but it doesn't really deliver any damage. The traction grenade brings all of your enemies together. By doing so, it makes your damage skills really efficient because you're gonna hit all of these enemies. You can kill a giant wad of enemies with a single grenade. But even for your overkill, which is your arm cannon, literally, that's built on fire and tech, this is more efficient when you have enemies towed. But the traction grenade also helps us get our mana back because of the gear set, which we'll get into later. But when defeating enemies that are towed or defeating enemies that are been suctioned by that grenade, you're going to recover MP. And so we have some really cool synergies going on here. So it's more than just sucking enemies in, it's making your very powerful weapons even more powerful by giving them the ability to inflict more collateral damage. Damage skills are coming from our one, which is our grenade throw, built on fire and tech, and then our number 4, which is our overkill, built on fire and tech. Singular is not going to help us here because that's not delivering any real damage, and our overclock powers up our skills, but driving skill damage into it isn't going to help us. But it's worth knowing what this does. So you got a cooldown and an MP cost and a duration on it, and then it's going to give you a skill power modifier increase of 20%. Then there's a burn. It inflicts burn on enemies damaged by grenade throws or overkill. So that's your 1 and your 4. And the burn deals continuous damage for a certain period of time, which is 7 seconds. And the damage interval is happening every 1 second at skill power times 115.7% modifier. So when you're thinking about this Lepic build, don't start by thinking about damage. Start by thinking about your traction grenade, because from there, your options open. You can apply your damage to your skills, or you can apply your damage to your weapons. I did find that when you roll into skills, you don't have enough time to use your weapon because you are just spanning those things. And first is cooldown, and we know that we're gonna use nimble figures for that, and that's gonna give us a 25.6% cooldown with no downside. I'm taking on hundreds of enemies all by myself. In order to do that, I have to have ridiculously low cooldowns. Otherwise, I'll get overrun with a single weapon reload. So we need MP conversion. That's gonna drive 36.5% more cooldowns at a cost of MP. That's a hit to a resource that we need desperately, but we are handling MP. Also, you should know in 400% infiltrations, you have a lot of MP on the ground. We're gonna add more skill cooldowns with our damage, but let's hold on to that for a second, because the next most important thing is range. We're thinking about our number 3, and it's got a crazy range. This goes up to about 27 meters, which is crazy wide. That's a whole room. So we're gonna wanna maximize that because you wanna pull all those enemies in. When they're being sucked in, they're not shooting at you. That's why it's important. Skill expansion for 92% range without a cost. And then we're going to use maximize range. Just like the cooldowns, we need ridiculous range. In a way, range saves us on having to have more cooldowns or having to use more mana because it's hitting so many enemies with a single toss of our traction grenade. It's saving us on a potential additional cost by having to throw out another traction grenade. So that's the basic setup for our traction grenade. Now we need a little bit of survivability. So let's throw on our HP mod here for 218%. And that's where I hold. That puts me a little over 9,000 in HP and then 10,000 in defense. Not much to shield. That is a little glassy, I'm not gonna lie. But the truth is, I am able to complete these 400% infiltration solo because of his crowd control. Being able to toss his traction grenade and his regular grenade, as well as his overkill, as often as we do, is his survivability. Hundreds of enemies are occupied and not shooting at you because they're either dying or being tractioned. You can put on more HP, and if you're running in a group, you have even more space to do that because you don't need to be as strong because your team is also helping you. But at the same time, if you're running in a group, you have more survivability because not as many enemies are shooting at you. They're also shooting at your team. So I feel like the HP we have is at a good place. I'd rather take damage because in a group, it's only going to get easier. When you're playing solo, it's all about positioning and strategy. And the only time it really gets hard is when you get those boss rooms because they also have AoE. That's annoying, I gotta say. So let's add that damage, but let's start with the damage that gives us cooldowns. So his damage skills are built on fire and tech. So we're gonna want focus on fire and focus on tech. All right, and that's what it'll look like. You do have the option to pick up more damage by replacing focus on fire with power increase. This blue mod here, that does net you more power, but our skills are plenty strong, especially our ultra. So what I'm really looking for is cooldowns. So I'm willing to accept a little less damage for a little more cooldown. And I'd even like more cooldown than I have, to be honest with you, but that's gonna come through the reactor and I just haven't found that reactor yet. Let's look at our cooldowns. The traction grenade is the most important here and it's at a 6.4 second cooldown. 6.4 seconds and we're taking on hundreds of enemies solo. Does 6.4 seconds sound fast? Well, when you compare it to 25 seconds, it does. But when you look at other Descendants and how fast you can get their skills out, like Haley's, you can get her skill out every 2 seconds. This is 2 to 3 times longer, depending. But there's some tricks to it. One is the cooldown starts immediately when you toss out your grenade. The traction is occupying all of the enemies in your zone, and it wouldn't make any sense to throw 2 traction grenades on top of each other or overlapping each other. So you wouldn't really want to toss one out while you have another one going. Because if it did actually work, it would split up the enemies and then you wouldn't get as effective collateral damage than if you put them all in a single pile. So the traction of enemies actually takes time. And in this case, our traction is 2 seconds. So it takes time to toss out your grenade and for it to find its location to start tracking. And then there's a 2-second traction time, and then you're shooting or throwing out another skill or whatever. By the time you're done with this series of mechanics, your grenade is ready to go. But what ends up happening is I will hit my traction grenade and throw out 2 regular grenades, and then my traction grenade is ready to go again. That seems to be the routine. So it's right there. But yes, I would like it a little bit faster, and if you can get a reactor that has cooldown on it, then do it, take it. Duration will also work, sort of, because it will hold them still longer, which will buy you a little bit more time before you have to toss out another one. On our grenade stacks, we're gonna have 1.5 second cooldown on that, which is crazy. And the burst damage on this is very nice. And you could just spam the hell out of that. And then cooldown on our ultimate is at 20.6 seconds, which is really short. Now let's add the rest of our damage. They've given us more damage mods that don't rely on crits. So one of those is fire amplification. Let's go and put that one on. So that's 65% fire skill power at the cost of critical hit damage. We're not running crits, so we're cool with that. And because we want to build into fire and tech, the other one's going to be tech skill power modifier at 61%. Since we're running fire and tech, of course, the other one ends up being our tech skill power modifier. This one isn't going to change the modifier number here. So as you can see in the burst damage, it says skill power times 565. What this one is doing is actually boosting the impact or the skill damage itself. So notice the numbers don't change there. Finally, we have a flex slot, and there's so many different directions you can go here. I didn't end up peeking out the range, but you can do that. And frugal mindset is actually a really good slot for that because you get range and you get skill cost down 8.5%. So it's helping your resources. And then that'll take you to your cap at 27 meters there. Because I was playing 400% solo, I needed to be more aggressive with my resources. So I landed on maximize conservation. So if you want to spam your skills as much as I am, then there you go. This is the one. It's going to cost you a skill modifier, but that's a drop in a bucket because he hits really hard, as you can see. Your other option is to put on more health so you're not so glassy, if that suits you. And if you're running in a group, you probably don't need as much skill cost savings. So this is what our setup looks like. Being able to use my ultimate as much as I do was the seller for me. This thing is so strong. Why would I want to sacrifice it for an LMG like the Enduring Legacy, which is also strong, don't get me wrong, but this thing just cleans up the entire floor. I'm running a fire tech with the secret guardian, which is really important to have the secret guardian if you're going to go skill build especially. And then I have tech and fire down below, but I would replace the fire with cooldown as I mentioned earlier. I'd replace both for cooldown and range or duration if I could, because he's plenty strong. For external components, the Slayer set was basically built for this dude. So yeah, run this one. So you get defense and max HP on your Ox, and then that's gonna give us 26% skill power, but I'm also after what's below that. So when defeating an enemy inflicted with Toad recovers MP by 12.2% at a 17% chance. There's also the skill cost at 15%, keep that in mind. Here's the sensor. You're gonna want MP everywhere. Same with the memory. Get your MP recovery modifier. That's even more important than your defensive slot there. And finally here, the item acquisition distance increase is really helpful. For the secret garden, I have typical stats here, but this weapon's set up for all sorts of cases. I have crit damage, rounds per magazine. I think that's the most important one for how I use this. And then firearm attack, and then bonus firearm attack versus Colossus, which we're not using here. I'm not shooting the secret garden, and every character that holds this weapon also doesn't shoot the secret garden because they're usually really busy with their skills. So we're talking Biesa, Lepic, and Freyna. A lot of them do use sharp precision shot. So with Lepic, it's all about his ultimate weapon. So sharp precision shot allows him to get a lot of shots out because it increases the rate of fire. That and the duration that we have is putting out a lot of shots, enough to clear a room. I haven't counted because I haven't needed to, but it's a lot. And you can walk around and collect mana while you're doing it, which is pretty neat. Fire rate up. You're going to want that, expand weapon charge, and compulsive magazine. So all these here on the bottom are what I'm using for the ultimate. And then rifle and reinforcement just as a basic. When I do have to shoot, it's going to be with the Enduring Legacy. I have firearm crit, fire attack bonus, and then firearm critical hit damage. This is a pretty typical setup. It's actually configured for when I use it with Enzo. So strong, I just don't care to change it for every character I use. Call me lazy. But lots of crits here, and fire enhancement is really big. And then I have mental focus, mostly because I'm using this for Colossus fights and you can get interrupted a lot. But the reason why I say it's what I prefer to shoot with, because on hitting burned enemies, increase firearm attack and apply this buff to the attack. It's the bottom stat there. You get additional damage and you're causing burn from your grenade and from your ultimate. So it just makes sense, right? You can use Greg's Reverse Fate, and the Thunder Cage actually has a really nice synergy with the traction grenade. So if you decide to go the weapon damage route instead of the skill route, you can throw out your traction grenade and then explode them with your Thunder Cage. Just make sure you have a really strong Thunder Cage if you do. And I just felt like between the grenade and my ultimate, there's just no time to shoot. And it was just all going faster using my skills. Quick look at the stats. I'm not gonna run through each of these individually, but just so you can have a screenshot. Thank you for hanging out with me. My name is Tuxedo Bandido. That's Tito Bandido.
One and only.
And this was another episode of The First Descendant. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss out on the fantastic experiences waiting for you in The First Descendant. And if you like videos like this, check out the one I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you want to see covered, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make everything possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be without you.
When you buy or download anything for the First Descendant, be sure to use Tux's creator code to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Follow me.